Hello everyone, and welcome to Internally Screening. Today we're doing another Hooptober review, and this time we're doing a review of Mad God, an adult animated horror nightmare directed by Phil Tippett, a legendary special effects guy famous for work on Jurassic Park, RoboCop, those types of films. And I believe it was on RoboCop 2 where he conceived the idea of this film, whatever that was, and it's sort of been in the making here or there.
Right.
He's been working on it for years now.
Yeah,
and
supposedly for 30 years,
Yes.
which is the big kind of tagline in selling this film.
Yeah, and it got picked up eventually. I think it got kickstarted and now it's on Shudder if you do want to watch it. It is truly bonkers. It is one of the most insane films you will ever see. It's kind of stop motion, kind of everything else.
Yeah.
It's got kind of a bit of live action. It's got like, I think some frames of just like CGI, some like animation. It's hard to say. And he did everything for this film. He wrote it, he directed it, I believe he even composed for it. And it's finally here. If I would like to give you a little sort of synopsis of what the film is about. It's really hard to do so. I guess you could say it's a dystopian film where a guy who I believe is called the Assassin descends into a hellish nightmarescape and keeps going down with the intention of doing something.
Blowing up a bomb.
Yeah, he has a bomb, yeah. Though, as we'll come to discuss, the plot of this film really isn't all too important to enjoying it. So Adam, what did you think of Mad God?
I have a complicated... It's very hard for me to pin down exactly how I feel about this film. I did enjoy it, and I will say I particularly enjoyed it. Kind of goes through various phases. It's kind of, I would say, 3 phases in the film. And the first phase is where we get most of our time with the assassin going through, and he's basically just sightseeing.
Yeah.
And it's a completely silent film outside of characters kind of muttering. But like in terms of dialogue, there is basically none that is intelligible. It's all nonsense when people do speak, which kind of adds to that nightmare sense of kind of confusion. Something about like the inability to articulate what is happening lends that a specific Lovecraftian horror to all of it, which I think this film has in spades. Because you go through, like you say, through like various levels of hell until you are at the most hellish point, and he still somehow finds on this sort of like bottom layer to find like little like pathways down further, and he just sees more and more awful, horrendous shit happening to people. There's these like weird slave creatures that are just look like they've made a belly button lint and shit like that, and they all get like splattered to death in constructing this giant pyramid for some unknown horrible like demon
baby god,
which occasionally like does like a weird 1984-esque speech to the people,
but it's
which
just
is just baby going like that. There's a bit where giants are being electrocuted in chairs so that they shit their organs out and feed some kind of demonic hell beast that's like mostly cybernetic.
I'd say that was one of the most amazingly just disturbing images of the film ever. It was just like, I could not believe what I was seeing.
That's just a little fucking slice of the chaos that this film provides. And because there's no real narration of like characters being phased by it, the guy just keeps walking through. He's like, I have a task, I'm sort of dutifully bound to wherever it is he's going, until he is eventually stopped by some, again, hideous abomination. You pointed out after we watched it that it kind of reminded you, and indeed me, of Euronymous Bosch paintings.
Yes.
And that I think was a perfect summation of the visual aesthetic of this film, because I was kind of finding it hard to pin down. It's not quite as typical of a representation of hell as you might get from certain sort of historical paintings.
Euronymous Bosch did those more like abstract, if you haven't seen them, there'll be some on screen now, but he did these sort of really strange abstract illustrations of hell, which are sort of quite iconic now. And he also did like a bunch of other non-hell paintings that were just sort of defined by just chaotic shit, where you've got like skeletons like raping and pillaging a village, and if you just look at every little corner, there's like a new thing to look at. I love those paintings. The energy this film provides, particularly in that first, I'd say like 30 minutes, it's almost like an adaptation of those paintings.
Yeah, it is.
With a sort of slightly humorous, modern angle to it.
Because kind of reactions, like there's a kind of stiffness and awkwardness, purpose built into some of the kind of animations. And even though people are reacting silently, there's a kind of like something weird will happen, and the assassin might go.
Yeah.
And then just carry on.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, I just thought it's so hard. I think it's easy to look at this film and just say this is a bunch of random shit, but if you actually thought about trying to construct something like this, it's clearly so intricate and storyboarded and thought out. I think maybe we're doing a disservice by reviewing this film having only seen it once, because I think there's so much detail, and as the film goes on it does become more abstract in its meaning, whatever it is it's trying to communicate, because the story is sort of minimal, but it's also incredibly intricate, because it's not so much about like a straight narrative
or like a singular
narrative
story.
Yes,
it's more
exactly.
a story of this entire world.
Particularly sort of like the last 30 minutes of the film.
Oh god, yeah.
It has the same energy as the first 30 minutes, but it becomes almost like this abstract kind of creation fable.
Yes,
like it's hard to say what it all means, but I don't doubt for a second that it's very purposeful.
Oh, 100%.
It's just not the kind of thing that you can watch and just go, bang, that's what it means.
Yeah.
I kind of appreciated that in a big way. I think the only issue I had was maybe the sort of middle section of the film starts very strong, because it is kind of like a 3-act play, right?
Yeah. Well, he starts getting like cut up and stuff like that, which is fucked.
Yeah, the gore in this film is
unspeakably awful, unspeakably heinous, because it is weird. It's so graphic, but because it's doing it in this kind of strange, like semi-cartoon, semi-puppeteered blend, there's like a kind of extremity to which it can go, which is way beyond what you would normally get. But also, it kind of strikes like a certain uncanny valley, like, you know, the blood is clearly like just some like sort of gloop and slop and whatever. There's no attempt for it to be realistic in the way that, say, war violence is realistic. You watch the beginning of Saving Private Ryan, and people are being eviscerated and stuff. You can directly relate, like, what you are seeing is fake, but because I have all of those body parts myself, I feel really ill right now. But you watch this, and there's just some kind of unspeakable, unknowable... it kind of doesn't correlate to anything, and yet there's something so hideous. It's kind of unspeakable.
The sound design is also excellent. It's, like, unbelievably good, and that does make the gore much more intense. Particularly in the dissection scene, which is just one of the most beautifully graphic things I've ever seen in my life.
Oh my god! I don't know how much.
It's so
how many
gleeful.
organs does that guy have?
I know.
They're digging around for a while with that.
It's like what I loved about that scene is it was just so, I could just tell how gleeful it was.
Yeah.
And
keep going.
Yeah. I get, so what I was saying is, with that sort of, you have the first section of the film, which is like the assassin wanders through hell, basically. Yeah. But that section to me is basically 10 out of 10. Perfect. I would not change anything about it.
With that, yeah.
Is basically flawless and one of the most amazing pieces of art I've ever witnessed. And it's sort of like just a continuous linear narrative, but it sort of has these little vignettes and stories that will be there for like 5 seconds and then it's gone. That just it's kind of, it's so imaginative. It makes me think like, oh, you know, like it makes me want to know more. The film is just kind of teasing you with this like kind of, it doesn't explain any of it. It's just there, and that makes it all the more sort of terrifying, like awe-inspiring. And then you have this sort of 30-minute section of the film in the middle-ish. It sort of briefly cuts to live action and does a sort of a bit of backstory for the assassin. Yeah. And I didn't hate this section. I still enjoyed it. I wasn't massively fond of the live action stuff just because I was just enjoying the animated side of it so much, and I feel like you could have done those sections of the film as the stop motion stuff, and it would have worked just fine. But I wasn't hugely keen on the live action stuff. There was nothing, it wasn't terrible, it just...
No, I completely agree. Yeah. I actually found it quite jarring. It really kind of revealed a completely different level of production value in my mind, because there's something kind of weirdly homemade about the puppeteering and the stop motion of all of it, which is very different to any sort of stop motion I've seen, even like low budget stuff like the early Wallace and Gromit stuff, because it's all done with clay and like little, you know, models and things like that. There's a kind of very specific aesthetic to it.
Well, it's sort of like we were talking about Coraline.
Yeah, we reviewed Coraline, and even though that has its horror angle to it, everything is kind of pristine and beautiful. it's so well crafted. This obviously is well crafted, but everything is intensely hideous. And I think part of that comes down to the use of different mediums. It's not just clay and plastic and paper and whatever. It's like
whole
bits and
miniatures, I think,
bobs. Like he's found stuff. A lot of it looks like things he's just bought. Like, oh, this is weird. Imagine that scaled down. Like, I'm sure there's one point where there's like a little jade statue, and it's just like you clearly bought that from a shop, but then it becomes this sort of pillar and things like that. There's like loose screws and bits of pottery in China and things like that. It's all very ramshackle, which I think helps. It really sets this apart completely. So when you have the shift into live action stuff, one, I think the lighting's way off. I think it's really obvious. We know it's being blended, but I feel like the attempt to seamlessly blend those two
elements, it makes you start
elements,
guessing. I think that's the main problem.
Yeah,
because there's points where it almost doesn't look live action.
Yeah,
like they kind of try and hide it in a few shots.
Yes,
and you're sort of thinking like, was that live action? I'm not sure. And I think that
it kind of makes you wonder why they bothered doing that when it's so clearly live action in those moments. But I also just think that stuff looks bad and ugly in an unintentional way, where the ugliness of the bookending acts feel very intentional and feel like you have a strange beauty to them. Yeah, that middle section just completely threw me off.
I have to say I disagree. I don't think they're ugly. I don't think they're as good. They're definitely not as you said, the main two sections of the film, in my mind, do have a sort of beauty to them. And the live action stuff in the middle doesn't quite match up to it. But also in the in that middle section, you do get the backstory to the assassin, which I thought was just as good. It's still super interesting.
Yeah.
And around the same level as the first and last part of the film, with him sort of doing this sort of car journey, and he's like driving around. There's like this weird city, and he's going through a graveyard, and it has this like sort of war backstory that briefly alluded to was kind of interesting, and I still don't know what it means. But yeah, and then you get to should we talk about the last section of the film?
Yeah, let's do it.
So there's this whole long period of the film where the live action people dissect the assassin, take the baby,
which is in him
for obvious reasons.
Obviously the baby's in the assassin.
Yeah, as you would know, and it looks like the Eraser baby, the Eraser head baby, I should say, and it's screaming constantly, which makes the film extra intense. Not that it needed to be, but I rate the commitment highly. And they give the baby to this terrifying looking floating figure,
witch doctor looking,
which has this amazing design. It's got this kind of like cage face with like these long spiny hands.
Yeah, and it's got the witch doctor nose thing going through it,
and it's like floating around, and it goes to this weird maze. And then there's this like weird garden library thing where you have this terrifying scrotum demon. He has these like two slave trolls. And he's got this. Also, I have to sort of touch on this. One of the most weirdly hilarious parts of the film, where it briefly goes to this utopian garden out of nowhere, and it's so clean and lovely that it's so funny. I don't know why. And he's like feeding these cute little like in the night garden style little figurines maggots, and they're like loving it, and then opens a gate, and this horrifying beast
like spider monster comes out and kills one of them. And there's like this whole it's like this sort of vignette love story where like the partner's been taken away and the other one's hiding behind a hedge like, oh no, my beloved, and then bang.
That was just perfect. I don't know what else to say about that. That was brilliant. And then I guess we're going straight into the spoilers now, the main spoilers, because this is the part of the film that I can't really get my head around, and I don't think I was supposed to, watching this one time. But the baby is then crushed into meat and then powdered and then released into the light in this kind of amazing special effect. I don't know how that was made. It looks fantastic. And then you get these kind of like, it almost becomes like a Tree of Life Terrence Malick film where you have these like shots of the universe and this sort of like dust, and then the film concludes. I was just kind of sat there like, wow.
You know what? I actually been thinking about this through this conversation. So part of what it shows in this creation thing is like a city being assembled and then being destroyed again.
Yeah, and you have like some graffiti for like 1 second or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, and I think perhaps what is being implied is that the assassin's been driving through in the middle section of the film through a war zone and like a destroyed city. I think perhaps the idea is that the scientist that created the assassin, or scientist that like did whatever he did to the assassin, because there's kind of this implication there's like a lot of people like him, and he sends him down, I think with the purpose of him being used to restart the universe.
Right.
So like humanity has failed, we need to like a hard reset, and if we sacrifice this one man and, you know, do some special sci-fi spooky gubbins to him, then he will become the savior, the new Jesus for this world.
mean, that's as good as an interpretation on first watch as I could imagine. That's a solid take.
Because there's this recurring thing of people being obsessed with, or like a recurring piece of imagery of like nuclear bombs going off, and right towards the end, the little mole man,
he's like looking through the telescope.
He looks through a telescope, and the one thing he stays his attention on is a bomb going off, and he's like, he almost like has a tear in his eye or something. There's like a kind of some kind of emotional response that he gives, and it's not 100% clear what that is, but it would make sense if it's kind of like a goodbye to it, or the cycle begins again. But it could be a completely different thing of like, well, I'll see you again soon. Like,
it's the ambiguity of the world is it's never really fully implied whether this is like some alien world, whether this is our world. I don't think it even really matters.
No.
But yeah, I think that's probably pretty solid take. I personally don't know what Mad God means, but I can't wait to watch it again. What would you rate Mad God?
Well, you know what? I was kind of umming and ahhing about my score for it before we started recording this, but I think I'll settle on a 7. I think it's such a bizarre experience. It is kind of one of those things that kind of smacks you around the head. And I was like in a daze throughout the entire film, and just kind of like, I was enjoying myself, I really was, but like it was hard to kind of have like any kind of analytical thought in my brain because I was just being bombarded with constant new stuff, and it was like a completely unique, amazingly crafted thing. Like you say, there's like such a finesse and artistry to the production here.
Crackhead Wallace and Gromit.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's it is just quite spectacular in as simple terms as possible. Like I imagine you're going to give it a higher rating than that, though.
Yeah, I would give this an 8 out of 10, and I can honestly see it going up because it's just, I don't think I've ever seen another film like it.
No,
it offers an experience that genuinely few other films can offer. It's the perfect first date movie.
Well, like the pleb films.
Yeah.
We won't get on if you can't sit through all of Mad God, I'm never marrying.
It's a real shame that this film has like no physical distribution, because I think the perfect way to watch this would be on a shitty VHS.
Oh, for sure.
Like, it would be amazing.
This is a film lost to the VHS era.
Oh man.
Yeah. I guess I would say, in terms of things that I was drawing from it during my watch, was kind of reminded me a bit of Brazil. I was getting some like Terry Gilliam
big time
influences in the design work and the creation, because obviously Terry Gilliam, as much as being a famous director at this point, made his name in animation and
dystopians.
Yeah, like, so there's a lot of that. And then kind of more thematically, I got stuff from Fantastic Planet.
Yeah.
Because like this kind of weird sub-worlds, like this kind of very alien
and there's like a unique animated experience. Fantastic Planet is also not really like any other film.
No.
Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, and I do wish I could change certain things about that sort of middle portion of the film.
Yeah.
But that said, I still think as a piece, it's so unique, it's so beautifully crafted and purposefully hideous in all of the best ways, and as I said before, easily could be written off as random shit, but watching it, I got this immense sense that everything about this had been completely thought out and was massively precise despite the chaos of it.
Yeah.
And I loved the experience of it, just because it's not holding a hand through anything. It's not trying to soften any blows.
No.
It's just a 100% unforgiving experience.
Yeah.
That is trying to say something very specific. I just have no idea what it is. So yeah, that is our review of Mad God. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. I don't know if I said that. If you like this video, press the like button. And if you disliked it, press the dislike. If you want to keep up with the videos, subscribe to the channel, because we've got more Hooptober stuff coming out. I know October is over, but we're going to keep reviewing into November. If you want to see what films we're going to be reviewing, the list is in the description. Subscribe to the channel. We've been Eternally Screening. Peace.